So yeah, on that note, we might get started if that's okay, Keri.
Sure.
Yeah, brilliant. So first of all, just a very brief introduction for me. I'm delighted to introduce Keri Pearlson as the last speaker for our series. A really nice way to end the semester's talks. I know Keri from working with her on organizing the CIO Summit at ISIS last year, and I have to say it was a brilliant event. And I think I played a role in it, but I have to say the main reason for such a successful event was down to Keri's leadership and organization from very early on, drawing on a very nice network of executives in the US and beyond, and really planning the event a long way out in advance. So again, Keri really took the lead on it, and it really paid off. I think it was the most successful CIO summit they've had in terms of executive attendances and academic attendances, and a lot of new initiatives and things like that. So anyway, that was a really great experience. And following on from that then, and having worked with Keri on that, I thought it'd be great to invite her to give a seminar. Now, I know cybersecurity is a really topical thing anyway, so probably something that we'd have loved to hear about in any case. It's a really important global issue at the moment, and actually our own university was subject to a pretty significant cyber attack a few months ago, so it's at the front of everyone's mind in Galway. But actually a really nice, timely reason for this talk is, as I mentioned, Keri, there's a few of us in the group, not myself, but a few others, doing some really nice work in the early stages of cybersecurity, but really starting to build some expertise, both in terms of research and teaching in this space. So learning about what you guys have been doing for a long time, you've been involved in cybersecurity long before cybersecurity was as prominent an issue as we're seeing now. So it'll be really good to hear about your group. So yeah, on that note, I'll hand it over to Keri. And as Keri mentioned, I think she'll welcome questions, either post in the chat, which I'll be watching, or if you just want to unmute and ask a question directly to Keri, that's okay too. So Keri, over to you.
Well, thank you, Kieran, and you're too kind. The CIO forum went on well because you were helping make sure everything worked remotely. The way we designed the program, I was in person and you were the remote person. I think there were more people remotely than even in the room. So it was quite a partnership, and I really loved working with you. You just made everything so much easier for me in the room. I didn't have to worry about so many things because you were in charge. So it was absolutely a pleasure to work with you, and I'm delighted to be here with your group today. So I am Keri Pearlson, and I'm the executive director of a research group at MIT in the business school, the MIT Sloan School, called CAMS. We call ourselves Cybersecurity at MIT Sloan, CAMS. We used to be called the Interdisciplinary Consortium for Improving Critical Infrastructure Cybersecurity. That's a mouthful. I can hardly say it, and our members really couldn't say it. But my colleague, Professor Stuart Madnick, came up with that name because he liked the initials. The initials were IC, IC. And so he would call it IC cubed. And I guess that's sort of MIT humor, because I never quite understood why that was so funny, but the way he tells the story is much funnier. However, we changed the name to CAMS, but we're still formerly the IC cubed consortium. And today I'm going to tell you three different things. I have three parts to my talk. We don't have to get through all of them, but just so you kind of know where we're going. I'm going to start with a little bit of an overview of cybersecurity as an issue today, and motivate why that's an issue. I know all of us know cybersecurity, but to some extent, it's sort of like motherhood. We all have mothers, but mothers mean very different things to each one of us. And the same thing happens with cybersecurity. Everybody shakes their head, yes, this is an important topic, but it means something different to everybody. So I'm going to level set with the way I come at the issues. And then I'm going to talk a bit about some of our research projects at MIT. I'm going to do kind of a quick scan of several projects. And then I'm going to dive deeper into the project of building a culture of cybersecurity. Kieran and I talked about that particular topic at length as something that might be of interest to you all. And it happens to be a project that I've been leading for about 5 years. So let me go ahead and jump in with sort of my overview of cybersecurity. And as Kieran said, I'm fine if you want to interrupt me. Probably the easiest way to do it is to raise your virtual hand, use your little icon and raise your hand, and then your picture will jump to the top of the list here, and then I can call on you, or you can type something in the chat. I do also have the chat window open, but Kieran will be monitoring it in case you need to reach me or you want to ask a question. All right, so we know cybersecurity is a big concern. I'm sure you all remember Facebook having made millions of people's information exposed a few years ago. But you might be interested to know that if you're a Words with Friends player, 200 million Words with Friends players information was exposed recently. If you're a Marriott customer, your information is likely out there from a hack that took place recently. If you happen to drive a Honda car or drink Jack Daniels, you might be interested to know that they both experienced ransomware attacks. Many of you will remember just a couple years ago when Twitter was hacked, and famous people like Elon Musk, shown here, their accounts were hacked, and the bad guys said, look, send us $1,000 in Bitcoin and we'll send you back $2,000 in Bitcoin. And you'd be surprised to know that many people fell for that scam and sent Bitcoin in. Now you might ask, why would anybody like Elon Musk offer $1,000 in Bitcoin? And it turns out the bad guys thought of that also. And so that when they were asked, they said, well, I'm very rich and this is the pandemic and a lot of people are suffering and we just want to make people's lives a bit easier. So if you could use $1,000 in Bitcoin, go ahead and send me 1,000 and I'll send you 2,000 back. Really, really insidious. More recently, last year actually, we heard of a breach called SolarWinds. And SolarWinds was a situation where the bad guys got into the install software after the software was ready to be distributed. It was an update actually. And it turns out that this one is kind of a bellwether, a landmark hack also, because all of the controls and all of the security people had in place weren't enough to keep them safe from the SolarWinds breach in many cases. And so this one became a highlight on our supply chain and how vulnerable our supply chain makes us, because we don't know exactly what's going on with our suppliers. And even though SolarWinds was a very responsible, secure company, the bad guys were able to use their SolarWinds install program to make it into thousands of other people or organizations' systems. More recently, earlier this year, we heard about a breach called Log4j. This one is interesting because even though we had SolarWinds a year ago, the bad guys found yet another way to get into our systems through our logging programs and our logging applications. Of course, the Ukraine-Russian war has launched all sorts of scares. We haven't actually seen cyber warfare beyond just between Russia and the Ukraine, primarily Russia launching cyber warfare attacks in the Ukraine. But we are all kind of on pins and needles right now about this because it might actually be something that happens anytime. And particularly in the United States, we're on high alert about potential Russian cyber attacks. The problem is we don't know where they would come from. And so we don't know what to protect. And that's kind of the theme in cybersecurity all around. You just don't know where the bad guys are coming next. And just to kind of round out my examples here, last week, this Italian luxury brand faced a ransomware attack. So even though we've had ransomware attacks for a long time, we're continuing to see ransomware attacks happen. So cybersecurity to me is more than just stealing credit card or customer information. Today, it's about disrupting your business through something like ransomware, using your business to get to your customer's business through supply chain attacks, making money, like with malware installed on your systems, or perhaps stealing your IP or other assets through nation state kinds of attacks. Now, you may say, well, this is really a big company problem, an international company problem, but it's not true. Small and medium-sized businesses are just as vulnerable, if not more vulnerable, in part because they're not big companies. They don't have the resources to put the same kind of level of defenses in place. The leading way that companies protect themselves is through a thought called defense in depth, where you have multiple layers of defense, sort of like a castle with a moat and with military men and with water that you have to get past. There's multiple layers of defense, and the bad guys have to find a way to get through all those different layers. And small and medium-sized businesses just don't have the resources, A, to put the level of defenses in place, and B, to put the resources in place to manage the levels of defenses that they need. But it turns out that the primary way that cyber attacks or data breaches happen right now is through human error, mostly phishing, where there was a survey done by Kaspersky where they reported that 90% of corporate data breaches were due to social engineering attacks on customer employees. And so even though we have all the technology in the world, we're still seeing breaches because one of the most weak links is people. In fact, when we all moved home and became remote workers, we saw a huge increase in malware and in breaches due to the fact that people were working remotely and they changed their behaviors. They didn't have the same kind of behavior in place that they had when they were in the office, when you can ask your colleague and just yell over the fence or walk around to the water cooler and ask somebody if something was suspicious. We saw a 20% increase, at least in this particular survey, of breaches because of remote workers' behavior. And at the same time, we saw a huge increase in malware, over 300%, and a huge increase in ransomware. So I like to say that the pandemic created the perfect storm of fear, uncertainty, doubt, and chaos. The fact that we were working from home, the fact that our processes changed, the fact that we didn't have the support around us, the fact that people started not knowing what they should or shouldn't be doing, really created a perfect storm for what I call the bad guys, the hackers of the world. The bad guys have really upped their game, and so we have to do the same. Our work locations are in transition yet again. I don't know how many of you are working from home, but right now I'm actually in Austin, Texas, and my office is in Boston, Massachusetts, which is far away from here. If you don't know the United States geography, I'm at least a good 4-hour air flight from where my office is. So keeping ourselves, our families, and our organizations safe and secure has never been more urgent or more important. And as I've just shown you, the technology, the firewalls, the spam collectors, et cetera, just can't keep us 100% secure. The SolarWinds is a good example of that. Just when we think we've got everything set up, the bad guys find a new way in. However, 90% of the breaches start with some type of human error, whether that's phishing, fake websites, files that you click on, and we're seeing the bad guys find using our supply chain and new and novel ways to get in our system. So let me just stop here for just a second and ask you, has anybody seen any suspicious emails? Have you gotten something that you know is phishing? I mean, we all know the Nigerian prince is not leaving us millions of dollars. And if you haven't seen that email, it's something that floated around years ago, and every now and then it crops up again. But we've seen many variants on that, some that are clearly phishing and not real, where it looks like some poor woman has lost her husband who left her millions of dollars, and she'd like your assistance in trying to bring it out of her country, or any variant thereof. Is there an email or a file or something that you've seen that you could share with me? I'd really like to hear your story.
Ooh, some of the good ones you see, it looks like an email from Amazon, and it's exactly the same way, the same structure and things like that. And that can be a bit misleading, particularly during COVID when people were ordering things from Amazon and you're expecting something, and then you get this email saying there's a problem with your delivery, click here or something like that. So obviously it's just a shotgun approach that every 1 in every 1,000 or something will probably click on it. But when you're in that frame of mind, this is something you're expecting, and this looks like something related to that, well, I guess some people can fall for it.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that example. Yes, there have been a number of phishing exercises, I guess, if you will, phishing attacks that look like they're from Amazon, We have a company in the United States called the Geek Squad. It's a Best Buy is one of our technology companies here where you can walk in and buy technologies, and they have a support group called the Geek Squad. We've seen emails from them. I actually have one in a few minutes that looks like it's from McAfee. So these bad guys, not only do they make the email look like it's from the company, they're now playing on the company's goodwill to have you click on something that is malicious. I've even seen one where they tell you that they've charged your account a certain amount of money. And if you didn't make this charge, you should call a phone number. And actually, it turns out that the phone number is also fake. And when you call them, they try to refund the money to your bank account. So they have you log into your bank account. And of course, they're capturing your credentials at that moment. So you log into your bank account, they can log into your bank account, and then they try to add money to your account. They don't actually add money, they make it look like they added money. And then you see that they added money, and then they say, oh my gosh, I didn't mean to do that. They added too much money, and now they have to take money out. And so they start transferring money out of your account. So that one is one of my friends in my apartment complex is an older woman in her 70s, and she fell prey to that. And she lost about $6,000 to that exact kind of a phishing exercise. Fortunately for her, that the story ends well, because the person that did that to her asked her to send the money over Zelle, and Zelle has a fail-safe. So it stopped the transfers after just a few of them. And then they were able to recover because there's a lag time in Zelle. So they were able to recover the money. So here's a bad guy who's not even very smart. But yes, they try to impersonate companies that we know. Yes, thank you, Aaron, for sharing that. Anybody have a different story? A different kind of attack that you've seen?
Actually, Keri, just from my experience, I mean, I'm probably like everyone else. We've got loads of those emails and texts and things. The concerning bit is they're getting more and more realistic. So just as an example, in Ireland, we would always have got text messages or calls from international numbers from Nigeria or wherever, many different countries, but never Ireland. But now we get them from cell phone numbers that look exactly like our own. And so you before, if we saw an Irish text message come in or a call from an Irish number, we would automatically assume it was okay. Now it's not okay, and that seems to be increasingly happening.
They're using the phones too. That's a good point. Is it's not just emails, it's phone phishing or video phishing. We've seen a lot of activity on social media, like fake posts on your favorite Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook, something like that.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Willie has actually, I think, to comment or a question.
Yeah.
No, it's just to echo that. I mean, they're getting very sophisticated in the sense that we've seen emails that are Oscailga, as in Irish, about mailboxes being full in the university. Our ESB, our electricity supply companies, have also essentially been sending it our revenue. So a refund of revenue is another email. And also, to echo Kieran's point, they're now masquerading as they look like the mobile number of the actual bank. Oh. So when you get it in, it's very similar and appears as if it's from your bank. It's getting very sophisticated and very targeted. Yes,
targeted and sophisticated. Yes, that's true, Willie. And I'm seeing that here in the United States also. I get phone calls, sometimes 5 or 6 a day, from a company wanting to sell me a car warranty or wanting to sell me something that is, fake. And because they come in over a phone line, you even are more suspect because you're now hearing a real person's voice who puts pressure on. So some of the key tools that they use in these emails are urgency, pressure, emotional, trying to capture your emotions, making it sound something dire. Really, there's some sort of physical emergency for them. I've heard scams like your child or your grandchild or your uncle, your niece or nephew are in jail and need you to send money right away to get them out of jail, and they can't talk on the phone, and they asked this person to call you. So yes, they're They're getting very sophisticated and they're learning a lot about you. And most of that learning comes from social media or from other publicly available information. Okay, so we're all experiencing this kind of human engineering. Our group at MIT is called CAMS, Cybersecurity MIT Sloan. And we look at the organizational, managerial, strategic, and government issues around cybersecurity. Our goal is to really raise the level of cybersecurity awareness in all types of organizations. And our funding model is through a consortium model. So MIT does not pay our salary, and we do not have large research for, projects, although we do have one, but for the most part, we are not funded through large research funding agents. We are funded through a consortium model where companies join us and participate in our work, help us with our research, and fund our research through their membership in our consortium. I believe you have a similar kind of consortium with the Lero group, Kieran? Is that how you guys are organized also?
That's true, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So here's a list of companies that, a sample list of companies that participate with us. You can see that it's global. We have companies like NG and Mondi Group, which are located in Europe. We have companies like C6 Bank located in Brazil. We have companies like Mars, which is in the US, but also in Canada and all over the world, ExxonMobil and Google and Microsoft. So you can really see that the companies that we work with are very, for the most part, large, but very global in nature. So what I'd like to do now is to share a few research projects we have with going right now, or that our group has done, and some of the publications we've had, just so you get a flavor of the kind of research that we do. I'm not going to do too much detail on most of these, maybe just a slide or two, just to give you a flavor. And then if there's something you want to talk about, we can dive a little deeper in it afterwards. I'll leave time for Q&A. So one project was around leadership from the board of directors. We asked the question, what role does the board of directors play in keeping an organization secure? And our research suggests that board of directors have fiduciary and oversight responsibility, and that all board members must be knowledgeable participants in cyber risk management discussions in order to be effective in their fiduciary and oversight responsibility. We published an article in Harvard Business Review on this just last month, in fact. And we looked at a group of board of directors. I'm actually on a board, and I'm a member of a couple of associations of boards. And so they were kind enough to one of them was kind enough to let me survey some of my colleagues in that group. And we found a couple things. First of all, there's 5 things boards need to know. And actually every manager needs to know these, but in the article, we really focused it on boards. First of all, cybersecurity is more than protecting data. And we've already talked a little bit about that. It could be about protecting data or stealing credit card information, but it's really about protecting your business. And it's about business recovery. If you are the victim of a ransomware attack, you have to decide if you're going to pay the ransom or not. That could be a board decision. And you have to understand what's at risk. Is it more than are your systems locked up? Are you an industrial company where your environment is locked up in some way or at risk? You know, today, if we have an industrial control device that's connected to critical infrastructure or boilers or chillers or some sort of other industrial machine, then locking that machine up could actually cause physical damage. It could cause an explosion. It could cause loss of life. So it's more than just protecting data. Second of all, directors must be knowledgeable participants in order to execute their fiduciary responsibility. They don't have to know day-to-day operations of cybersecurity, but they have to ask some questions so that they can make sure that the plans that are in place make sense. Number 3, boards must focus on risk and reputation and business continuity. But cyber professionals don't. They focus on policies and practices and controls. So we have a mismatch in the language. And it's important for executives to realize that in order for them to get the information they need on risk, reputation, and business continuity, they have to really understand where those cyber professionals are coming from so they can ask the right questions. Fourth, and I already mentioned this as our group, but the prevailing approach for security is defense in depth. You don't just make one investment and you're done. You don't just say to one group, your job is to go ahead and keep us secure and you're done. It's multiple layers of defense, and therefore the boards need to understand the big picture so they can understand what the layers are that the company has put in place. And finally, cybersecurity today is an organizational problem, not just a technical problem. It's an organizational problem because bad guys are targeting people, and our technologies just can't keep up with all the new and novel ways. We need the people in our organization to actually have the eyes and ears to see if something's going wrong. So in this particular project, we talk about we use the US National Institute of Standards and Technologies, or NIST, cybersecurity framework. I don't know, I can't see most of you guys, so you can't just raise your hand and tell me, but I don't know how many of you are familiar with this model, but it's a very popular model put out by the US government that helps organizations build a cybersecurity strategy. So there's 5 components to this model. You want to identify what your crown jewels are. What do you need to protect? Obviously, you want your whole company protected, but just like in your home where you can't make sure you don't protect everything at the same level, you have some insurance for maybe your car and your house, and that might be a little different than for your laptop or for some of the other things in your house. Same thing in your company. You can't protect everything at the same level. It's just impossible to be 100% secure on every item. So you want to identify the crown jewels. You want to identify what are the risks you're most worried about. And then you want to build a plan to protect those assets. You want to build a plan to detect things. The bad guys could have been in your system for months, maybe years before. They could have planted malware long before they've executed some sort of bad damage to your company. So you want to have a way to detect. You want to have a way to respond if you do detect, or if you do feel a cyber attack coming on. What is your response plan for that attack? And then what is your business recovery plan? As I said, boards have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure against large threats to the organization, and certainly cybersecurity would be one of those threats. So we recommended in this article and as research 7 questions, and the 7 questions is simply a number that's easy enough to remember, but large enough to actually get some information. And the 7 questions are based on this model so that boards of directors can have a place to start. We learned that one of the main issues for boards is that they think it's a technical problem, and so they don't think it's something they have to manage, or they don't even know where to start. You know, when you put a framework like this in front of an executive, it gives them a language and a structure to then structure their thoughts and their ideas around. So this is one of the projects that we have ongoing right now, and that's the role of a board. The board plays in keeping the organization secure. Another project that we have going might be a little more relevant to some of you is around compliance. We asked, what is the relationship between regulatory compliance and cybersecurity? Turns out that in many cases, compliance and cybersecurity are at odds with each other. You could be compliant and not secure, and you can be secure and not compliant. A good example is GDPR. You know, you could be compliant with GDPR and you can get rid of all the records that you're supposed to get rid of when somebody tells you that they don't want you to keep their information any longer. However, that's not good cybersecurity practice, because if you're breached, how do you know which records are stolen if you've gotten rid of some and not gotten rid of others? And of course, if you keep track of what you got rid of, you're not in compliance with GDPR. So our research suggests that compliance acts as an accountability enabler, gives organizations a platform for understanding what they should be accountable for. It's an assurance function to make sure that they've done the best that they can to be, in this case, cyber secure, and a point of transformation or simply an ongoing process for organizations. It's just a motivation for trying to become better and more secure. But simply looking at compliance and saying, I'm compliant and therefore I'm cyber secure, which many organizations have done, is not actually a way to make sure that you are cyber secure. A third project we have was one around reducing or protecting our products and services. It turns out that many organizations are not doing the best they can to, well, I shouldn't say it that way. We asked the question, how can we reduce the cost of building secure products and services? We noticed that for some companies, it takes a huge amount of effort for them to create secure products and services. And our research suggests that many organizations bolt on cybersecurity in their design process rather than baking it into the product design process. We published an article on this in the Sloan Management Review just a few months ago. And in this one, we talked about a couple of things. It looks like from our research that organizations fall into one of these 4 levels in terms of mindset for how they build their products and services. The lowest level is they bolt on cybersecurity afterwards. So the designer designs the product or service that they want to build. And then through a testing or quality control process, they test the product and they make sure that it meets certain criteria through a quality control or testing process. And some of those testing processes are looking for known vulnerabilities. So if it's a known vulnerability, then it might get caught if you're at this level. Those that are a little more mature in their mindset, they actually have a secure design process. It runs parallel to the product design process. So the designers are designing their product, and along the way, there's a parallel process to test security multiple times during the process and possibly bring in some security into the design. That works a bit better because there's at least an ongoing process, but like level 1, you could run into a situation where you've built a product and it's made it through a number of steps in the process, and then you find out there's a security vulnerability and you have to retrofit the product with some security measures, some security code or a different library or something along those lines. It's quite expensive. So the next level that companies tend to do is level 3, which is they add a security expert or a consultant to the product design process. They don't actually teach their designers about security. They add an expert into the process who knows security. Again, not bad. They're not producing insecure products that way, but first of all, much more expensive. Usually the security expert is a consultant, an ex officio addition to the team, to the product development team. And so they don't know the product inside and out. They're working on multiple projects. And so they're looking for certain holes, certain vulnerabilities that they know about. And therefore the product still could get through a bunch of gates and in the end, not be very secure and have to go back to the beginning to reevaluate. Or in some cases, companies, they release a product that has security vulnerabilities and they let their customers know, we've identified these vulnerabilities and we're going to close them later. What we uncovered in our research is really the need for a building from a cybersecurity mindset. Teaching the non-cyber designers from the beginning to think about cybersecurity. Now, they don't have to be experts. It's still useful to have actually all 3 of these levels: testing or quality control, a security design process, and a consultant that works with the product design. But many initial designers don't have any cybersecurity training. And when we asked about that, they told us that they weren't motivated by cybersecurity. Their motivations were things like manufacturability. Are we designing something that can be manufactured? Or usability. Are we designing something that our users could use? Or time to market. We don't have time to think about cybersecurity. We already have so many other features we have to make sure are built into our product. Cybersecure, here's the list of features and here's the cutoff line, and we're going to do these top features and here's cybersecurity. So they just don't get to the cybersecurity features because that's not what they're rewarded for. So one of the solutions here is to actually build with a cybersecurity mindset so that designers are motivated and are taught from the very beginning to at least consider cybersecurity as they build their designs. When they have choices to make the secure choice. They didn't actually have that mindset, which was kind of a surprise to me. So interesting project, ongoing still, has to do with the human side of product design. Okay, another project we're working on, this one is something I'm doing right now. We're actually submitting a paper to ISIS on this topic on security and competitive advantage. We asked the question, how can investments in cybersecurity create a competitive advantage? The motivation for this project is that most organizations talk about cybersecurity as an infrastructure investment. It's a cost. We have to make something secure. We have to spend money to build these layers of defense. So we said, well, what if it wasn't just an infrastructure cost? What if it actually created a competitive advantage for your company? What would that look like? And our research suggests that a competitive advantage can be gained from a cyber investment, either by creating higher barriers for competitors, your product is more secure in some way, or you offer features that are more secure. For example, in one company, they have a warranty. It's a database company, and they have a new technology for managing data, and they got Lloyd's of London to insure them. So if you go with their product, you get a Lloyd's of London warranty that if there is a cyber breach, that Lloyd's of London will cover up to $5 million of the cost or something. So you can see where cybersecurity has become, has created a higher barrier for competition in that case. We see cybersecurity lowering costs. If your systems are more secure in some way, if your infrastructure is more secure, then perhaps it's less costly for you to do business. You might be able to experience less cyber ransoms or breaches or other malware infestations. And it also offers new areas of business opportunity. We've seen organizations, and we've documented some organizations that use cybersecurity to launch themselves into a whole new business area, maybe a secure platform or some sort of secure products that they didn't offer in the past, and to use cybersecurity as, if you will, part of their marketing for their new business opportunity. But this is actually ongoing right now, and hopefully our paper will be accepted at ISIS, and we'll be able to present that next fall at the ISIS conference. All right, I've got a couple more projects here, but let me stop and see if anybody has any questions about anything so far. I know I'm throwing a lot at you. This is the MIT approach. We call it the fire hose. So you're quite drenched from all these ideas, but let me just stop and see if you want to ask a question before I share some of the rest of these projects with you.
Hi, Keri. I have a question. My name is Liliana Pasquale. I'm based in UCD in Dublin. I have a question. When I got to know your project, I have a question related to evaluation. So I guess one challenge is that it's very hard to evaluate the impact of applying these let's say, I will say, mind shift changes in your company. So how do you measure the impact of these changes? Like, do you have any suggestions on that, or any?
Yes. Okay, so you're asking a question about impact and measure metrics. How do you know that your cyber investments are returning some sort of are doing what you expect them to do? So we look at that in three different ways. First of all, just asking what the impact is too broad of a question for a manager to even think about. So the first set of projects we have is around sort of the NIST model, back to the beginning, to that model that I shared, where we say, what is your goal? What are you trying to protect? And is that being protected? So that's one, and then that becomes measurable. So you can say we're trying to protect our data, and you can say our customer data, and is our customer data been breached? And you can start to measure what kind of breaches you've been able to stop, what kind of phishing exercises you've been able to execute, and to see how people have done. So there are, depending on what you're trying to measure, what you're trying to achieve, there are measures. So it's sort of like saying, is my company profitable? Well, your company's profitable if you look at it, if you take it one level down and look at what you can include in the equation. Same thing with, are you secure? You can answer that question if you take it one level down and say, what are you trying to be secure in? What are you trying to secure? So that's one level. Second level that we look at is risk management. And at the beginning, I mentioned that boards talk about risk. That's a topic they talk about. Well, that's also, of course, the topic senior executives, non-cyber executives talk about. And so we have a couple of different ways to look at risk management, and you can measure your success at risk management. Personally, to me, it's a little more theoretical than it is practical, but that's how managers do it, because managers are always asking risk. What is the risk? And what is my reduction in risk if I make this investment? And so there are tools to use to talk about the reduction in risk. Again, it gives you a more objective goal for measuring the success of your program. And then the third one, which I'll get to in just a few minutes, so I'm glad you raised this question, is around the people side. I actually have a project here that I was going to talk about right here. Oops, that's not the one. This one. So this is the culture project that I wanted to jump to anyway. So I'll go ahead and jump to this now. We asked the question about how do we create a culture of cybersecurity in our organizations. And the project, one of the companies we looked at is Yahoo. Yahoo is, I think you all know Yahoo. It's a US company, but I think it's a global company. They were a platform company offering email and cyber and you know, computer, like sort of like information. They're media company. They just were a platform. And then they were absorbed by a company called Verizon, and now they're back out and they've spun out themselves again as Yahoo. And so they were one of the companies we worked with to write this particular paper and to look at their culture. And what's really important in their story, and so I would encourage you to go grab this paper off Harvard Business Review, is they wanted to be able to measure the success of their investments in creating a culture of cybersecurity. So in their case, it was about the people piece. And for their organization, they identified what they called credential capture. They wanted to make sure that their employees did not share credentials, logins, and passwords. And so they had a very specific goal in their cybersecurity program, and they were able to measure the reduction in credential capture as part of the management of the investment they made in creating a culture of cybersecurity. And this paper actually outlines some of the things they did and then some of the ways that they measured it. So let me stop there and see if I've answered your question.
Now, I'm trying out a few things just to see.
Nice.
Just because, is that too big?
I'm sorry, Marie, I hear you, but I don't know what you're asking. Okay, maybe that wasn't meant to be a question. Okay, so
Thank you, Keri. That answered my question. And actually the article seems very interesting and I took a note of it.
the ethical question?
So no, I was just saying that that answered my question. And thank you for the reference. It looks really interesting.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions so far? Should I jump into the discussion of culture? Okay, hearing no other questions, I'll jump into the discussion of culture. All right. So we asked the question, how can we create a culture of cybersecurity in our organizations? Our research suggests that many organizations spend a lot of time building training programs. You probably have one at your university. When you onboard at your university, you probably have to take some sort of either online program or maybe it's an in-person class where they tell you things like change your password every 6 months, use a long password. If you see something, report it here. There's a bunch of policies and controls that they might put in place that they share with you. And many organizations build a training program that people have to take every year. There's sort of an update. And it's part of their compliance. They want to check the box that you've taken this research, this cybersecurity class. But it turns out, I don't know about you, but many people, when they're doing their compliance training, they're busy on their phone, playing a game. They might be answering their emails. It's something you have to do, so you're not paying 100% attention. You're just waiting to get through the pages. Or perhaps you take the class, but the retention is very small. We all know that when you have to take a class at a time that's convenient for the teacher, you don't necessarily retain it as well as if you take the class at the time that you need it. In other words, instant training of some sort. Or perhaps you didn't ever take the class. In my university, my colleague Stuart Madnick, one of the founders of our research consortium, he's been at MIT since 1966. When do you think he took the cybersecurity training class? Yeah, so that's true. We didn't have one in 1966. In fact, Stewart is one of the early researchers in cybersecurity, and he wrote a book about it in 1970 that in some circles is one of the Bibles of what we call modern day cybersecurity. So he's never had the cybersecurity training class. Okay, I'm not too worried about Stewart because his research is cybersecurity. But what about his colleague in the marketing department, or in the dean's office, or an assistant, an administrative assistant who's also been here 30, 40 years? They probably never took the cybersecurity class either. So training classes just are not enough to create a culture of cybersecurity. So I've already talked a little bit about Yahoo. What we've noticed in our research is that cybersecurity tends to fall into one of 4 levels. Most people are not at level 1, but that level 1 is the mindset of the technology will keep us safe. And I hope at this point in our talk today, you realize that the technology can't keep us 100% safe. It doesn't take very much for an organization to experience some sort of cyber breach or just a scare to realize that the technology is not enough. The headlines themselves will convince you that technology can't keep us 100% secure. So then people assume that their IT team or their security team will keep them secure. And again, the security teams do really well. The fact that we don't see more breaches is a real testament to how great our cybersecurity teams are at keeping us secure. But the fact that we do see a lot of breaches in the industry means that they themselves can't keep us secure. They can't stop you from clicking on a phishing email. They can tell you not to, but they can't really stop you. It's not their job to stop you. They don't have access to many of the organizational mechanisms that might encourage you to think differently, but they can set up policies and procedures. So then we look at our business managers and we say, well, it's up to the managers to make sure their teams know what to do and that their teams that they keep their teams safe. And that's better. At least we're now into the business domain, but it's still not enough. We want everybody to have some level of knowledge of cybersecurity so that they can keep themselves, their team, their organization secure. Now, I don't want to make people paranoid. I don't want you to worry that every single time you're on your computer, you're subject to a cyber attack, although honestly, that's true. What I want you to think about is, what can I do to make sure that I keep myself, my teammates, my family, and my organization secure? I just want that in the back of your mind. So when you see something, you say something, or when you get to a point where you have a decision, you make a secure choice rather than open up a vulnerability. And that's kind of the basis of my model. So this is the framework that we talk about, that we've created in our organization and our research. And it starts on the right-hand side. At a very high level, we want to drive behaviors. We believe behaviors are driven by values, attitudes, and beliefs. And those values, attitudes, and beliefs are driven by external influences and managerial mechanisms. I'm going to dive a little deeper in each one of these just to help you understand what our framework is all about. So let me start with this. And this kind of already is old hat to you guys, because we talked about this kind of example earlier in about 45 minutes ago. But here's an email I got, ironically, just this week. And my question to you is it real or is it phishing? I don't know if you can see it. I don't know how big your screen is in front of you, but what do you think? Is this real or is this phishing? What are the clues? What are you looking for to make that decision?
McAfee is spelled wrong.
McAfee is spelled wrong. Okay, so there's typos. It's spelled wrong. Are you seeing it spelled wrong right here? McAfee. Are you seeing it spelled wrong right here? McAfee. So there are errors in the spelling. That's true. What else do you see?
Email address.
The email address of the sender.
The sender's mail address is an email at Gmail. Doesn't even look like a McAfee email. Yep, good. What else do you see?
The name is not specified. They are user.
Yes, so the user who they sent it to is billingtext@gmail.com. Yep, it's not even sent to me, although I'm the one that received this. You see anything else?
Even the tone of the email.
The tone?
The tone of the email, greetings of the day. You know,
Greetings of the day. Yeah. Can you imagine a company starting their email with greetings of the day? Yeah.
absolutely not.
Yep, and thank you there's no space here. I noticed that. I noticed the word amount is capitalized.
Mhm.
I noticed that there's no punctuation after the word below. And this isn't even appropriate grammar in any kind of English language. Your amount has been successfully charged and billing receipt of the same has been attached below. I don't even know what kind of grammar. That's not American English, and I don't think it's anybody's English. Okay, so let me just blow up a couple pieces here. Here's the receipt. You already pointed out that McAfee is spelled wrong. There actually is no email here. There's just a phone number. So if you have a problem with it, you're supposed to call this phone number. And of course, when you call this phone number, you are making the call to the bad guys. And so they then have already captured your attention. And so they already know that you're a potential a potential victim because you've already called them. And the amount was $497. And so what they're going to do with this, and of course the grammar here is awful also, what they're going to do with this is they're going to try to get you to give them back at least $497 and probably more than that. So yeah, so obviously this is phishing and not a very well designed one. It turns out that it's not well designed, and it could be not well designed on purpose because they don't want somebody who would notice all of those errors to call them. They don't want you because you're going to figure out pretty quickly that they're fake. They want someone who doesn't notice those errors or who calls anyway, because that person is most likely already bought into the story and is now going to be somebody that's already feeling urgency, because you're feeling urgency that they charged you $497. By the way, it doesn't even say how. It says they auto debited, but you can go to your bank account and look and see that there's no debit there. But if you don't do that, they've already created this urgency in you, and they've already created some sort of concern. And that's the emotions that they're playing off of to get you to do something, to get you to in this case, call them. All right, how about this one? I know this one's hard to see also, but this is one from Nationwide. And it basically, this one, here's the email made a little bit bigger. Does the email look real? The action of this email is they want me to click this red button, activate now. And here's the email. Does that look real to anybody, or does that look fake to somebody? Anybody? What's your thought on the email, where it's coming from?
Yeah, it looks a lot more real.
A lot more real. Okay. Why is that, Kieran?
Just it looks very professional. The email is emailnationwide.com, which is quite believable. Yeah, just the attention to the tone, dear Nationwide customer, although generic, it's much more in keeping with what we would get from one of these companies. And there doesn't seem to be any typos or errors that we would see in the last one.
Yep. Good point. So it looks more real. Anybody think this might be a phishing email? What might give you a clue that make you suspect?
Just a website name. You'd imagine a big company like Nationwide that have their own website. They wouldn't have to rely on email-nationwide.com. So it looks like it could be something constructed.
Yeah. So maybe email-nationwide does sound more realistic, but it's not nationwide.com.
Yeah.
And I looked at it and I thought, is that L an L or is that L a capital I in email? Because that could be a clue. That's another way that they create emails that look real, even though they're not real. So I was a little suspect of that. Anything else that might have made you suspect? Okay, well, let me tell you what I saw. I got this email. You can see it was sent to me, and I got it in a couple years ago, year and a half ago. And I noticed just what you said. The email to me, it looked suspicious because it said it wasn't nationwide.com. Second of all, it was very generic, and there's no information about, who to call or what to do. There's no website to go to. There is a phone number here. But you would expect the bad guys, even the McAfee one had a phone number in it. So there was no way to validate what this was. It's just this button. They want you to click on a button. And when you can't do it in my PowerPoint, but when you hovered over the button, you didn't see a link that looked normal. It was encoded, it was encrypted. It does have the footer, but anybody could create this footer, and I don't have any way to know what NPO 1133AO is. So I don't have any way to know what some of these things are. So I looked at this and I said, well, let me go to the Nationwide website and see if they actually offer this product. This happens to be a product for cybersecurity, personal protection. And so I went to the website, and this is a blown up piece of the email. I went to the website and I couldn't find any information about cyber protection services. So I thought, well, I'll just take a chance and call this number. And I'm not going to buy the service, but I'm interested because I'm teaching cybersecurity to people, and I want to see if this is real, and if it is or isn't, I can use it in my lecture. So I called the number, and I called my insurance agent first, and she didn't know anything about this service. So I called Nationwide. I called this 866 number, and I got an agent, and I asked him, and he said it was real. Of course, I expected that. And I said, can you tell me something about my account so that I would know that you actually are real, that you're really a Nationwide person? And he didn't have any information about me because it's a third party that they've brought on to do this. So he couldn't check my Nationwide account. And I asked him a bunch of questions. I was probably very annoying to him. And in the end, I did believe that it was a real product, and he was able to give me a web link, and I was able to look on a web link and see that it was real. Although honestly, that was a vulnerability in and of itself. I would have expected a really good scammer to have a website to send me to. So that was it. Turns out it is a real product and service. And my conclusion of this email is the only people they should reject from this service are the people that actually click on the button. Because if you clicked on this button, again, like the first button, you're not really paying attention to, is this real or is this not real? You're getting sucked into the offer, to the emotion of, yes, I might need this service, or yes, this looks kind of good. I thought that this email all along here really looked like a fake email. It looked like phishing. And companies, the lesson here, of course, is companies who really want you to take an action from an email are going to have to find new and better ways to do it, because the bad guys have made us all suspicious about this stuff. Okay, so we want to drive those kind of behaviors in our people. We want to drive behaviors that are related to their job and that aren't related to their job. The buying Nationwide insurance is not related to my job, but MIT would want me to question any emails just because they wouldn't want me to click on something that I shouldn't click on. We know these kind of behaviors are driven by the values, attitudes, and beliefs that you have. I personally have an attitude of a little bit more suspicion about cybersecurity because of what I do in my job, but we want everybody to be a little bit more aware. And the way we see that is at the leadership level, the group level, and the individual level. If leaders make cybersecurity their priority, if your dean made cybersecurity a priority and talk to you guys about it regularly, you're probably going to be a little more aware of cybersecurity, and you are probably going to have an attitude of, wow, this is important to my dean or my department chair or my supervisor. Maybe I should pay attention to it. And that alone is going to change the culture. Just talking about it is going to change the culture. Having top management make cybersecurity a priority, investing in ways to make cybersecurity more robust in your organization is a way we see the values, attitudes, and beliefs of top management. I'll give you one more story. A bank that we studied, their CEO, not their cyber guy, their CEO started every all hands meeting with a cybersecurity moment. And in that moment, he either talked about something he saw, an email that crossed his desk, or he brought up somebody who had a story to tell. But the fact that he started every meeting with a cybersecurity moment made the people in the organization aware of cybersecurity being his priority. And it drove an attitude of cybersecurity throughout the whole bank. It took it out of the darkness and put it in the light. Okay, we see those kinds of things at the group level. If people are talking about cybersecurity, maybe on their Slack line or maybe over the water cooler. We see it at the individual level when people take action. If you see a phishing email, what do you do with it in your school? Do you just ignore it? Do you report it someplace? At MIT, we have an email called, it's phishing@mit.edu. And if you get a phishing email, they want you to forward it. So if you have something you can do, if you can actually take an action, then you're more likely to believe that you should take that action. So we see values, attitudes, and beliefs at 3 levels. Now, the values, attitudes, and beliefs are created by 2 sets of mechanisms. One are external influences. If you're a bank or if you're a hospital, you come from an industry where security and privacy is already highly valued. And therefore, you probably have values, attitudes, and beliefs that are stronger in keeping your data protected than an industry that doesn't have that kind of assumption. That doesn't mean things are insecure in industrial control environments. It just means it's not as high a priority, and therefore you have to work harder to change the values, attitudes, and beliefs. But the external influences you have no control over as a manager. Those are what are built into your environment. It's the managerial mechanisms that most managers really relate to in this research. It's about things like training, which is table stakes. You have to do some training to set up what's the basis for cybersecurity. What do you want people to do? What's the baseline? But then in one organization, they hired a marketing person to promote their culture, to help create values, attitudes, and beliefs. And I thought that was a brilliant idea. They're an international company and they hired a marketing person. And what do marketing people do? They change hearts and minds. They change attitudes. They teach you about their product or service in such a way as that you want to take action. And so by bringing a marketing person in with all the marketing mechanisms that she brought with her, they created all sorts of activities. Some were training and some were communication plans, awareness programs, but some were not. They were just things like getting her executives involved or personally promoting cybersecurity in a way that really resonated with their organization. And in her case, one thing she did was change the language. They don't call it cybersecurity, they call it data protection. And just that small change in words in her environment completely changed the way people look at cybersecurity. They didn't know what to do to be cyber secure, but they know what to do to protect data. They know to lock up their computer. They know to, not share a file they shouldn't share. But it wouldn't have dawned on them that that was cybersecurity. So just changing the words drove actions. One other set of things a manager can do is rewards and punishments or performance evaluations. In one organization we looked at, if you click on a phishing email the first time, you take an automatic class. If you click on it the second time, you have to meet with your managers. The third time you meet with HR. The fourth time you get a warning, and the fifth time you're fired. You lose your job if you click on a phishing email 5 times, phishing exercise 5 times. Why would they do that? Well, in some organizations that wouldn't work. You couldn't fire someone for clicking on phishing. But in this organization, their industrial control environment, and a phishing email could unleash malware that blows up something. So people's lives are at stake. They can't take a chance on somebody. You're too high a risk if you click on a phishing email 5 times. So they fire you. It's the same thing as if you display insecure behaviors in a construction zone. They can't have you there. You're too dangerous. You can't have that job. So you can see where those kinds of managerial mechanisms will really change the culture of an organization. So this is my full model, and it's available on a paper on our website. It was published in MIS HICS, the Hawaiian conference, a couple years ago. So there's an academic paper on this, and then the Yahoo paper also refers to this model. Okay, so let me conclude here with a call to action, and then I'll open this up just for questions. So I've given you a lot of information. What I want to do is bring it back down to something you can do differently tomorrow. You can do differently in your environment. I should tell you, I'm the only cybersecurity person in my social group. My girlfriends and my guys that I hang out with, the other couples, the parents I know, none of them are cyber people. But just knowing me makes them more aware of cybersecurity. They're always asking me questions, sort of like if you're the IT person in your group, people always want to know how to program their computer or how to fix their iPhone. Same thing happens with cybersecurity. So you as a if you talk about cybersecurity, if you bring it to the forefront in your environment, whatever that is, your work or your personal environment, you can help everybody be a little bit more secure. But here's things you can do to protect your organization. First, model the values, attitudes, and beliefs you want from those around you. You can make heroes out of those who do the right thing to protect digital assets. You can show them it's one of your priorities, and then it becomes one of their priorities too. You can work with your cyber team to better understand how your organization is managing cyber risk. Are you protecting, detecting, and responding? How are you doing it? And that NIST model, the 5 buckets, is a good place to start. The 7 questions is a good place to start. You can share ideas. I told you the story about the executive who started his all hands meeting with a cyber moment. Just by bringing that to the organization, he's shining light on cybersecurity. The bad guys thrive in the fear, uncertainty, doubt, and chaos, in the darkness. And so if we can just start every meeting with a cybersecurity discussion, or even, your lunchtime, when you're having lunch with your colleagues, and you say, have you seen that phishing email? Or did you hear about the fact that, ransomware, the latest ransomware, or you said you guys had a breach at your school? Maybe you had something that you could bring up and people could talk about. Do your updates. We all hate these updates. I don't know about you, but every time they update my iPhone, they send new software, they change something that I liked. The last time they did it, they moved the search button from the top to the bottom, and now I can't find it. Every time I go to my iPhone, it's in a different place. I really hate that. However, those updates are there to fix vulnerabilities, to patch the vulnerabilities. So you want to make sure that you have the latest updates installed on all of your systems, because that is a #1 way that companies, that technologies get breached, is people don't install patches. They leave open known vulnerabilities, and the bad guys know those vulnerabilities. That's how they get into your systems. Obviously, don't click on any websites or emails that you don't know exactly who they're from. I personally am very suspect of anything at an email asks me to click on. I usually don't click on it. I really go through the kind of thinking that we did a minute ago, just to see if it's real or not real. And you can use this email, haveibeenpawned.com. Many of you probably already know that already. You can go to that website and type in your email, and you can see if it was part of any of the breaches, if your information has been compromised. If it has been compromised, the first thing to do is to change your password. If they have your email and not your password, they won't likely be able to get into your system, unless you change the password to something really simple, like the word password. If you change the word password to, you change your password to the word password, you're picking the password that many people use, and it's pretty easy to break. The rule of thumb is longer is better. And the rule of thumb is you don't have to make it complex. You don't have to use characters and words and numbers and letters mixed in a manner that you can't understand, because a computer doesn't care if your password is the word password or if your password is 68 asterisk exclamation point Y. It's the same to a computer. They're just characters. What is effective is longer, a passphrase, a sentence, or perhaps a bunch of words strung together that make sense to you. So next time you update your passwords, update it to a passphrase that makes sense to you, and that will help you protect your passwords. And of course, keep aware and educate yourself. And here's a list of things that you can do if you want to access some sites that have information. Unfortunately, I'm not sure what the right Irish sites are, and there are probably some counterparts to these that are specific to your country. But in the United States, we have a publicly available website for our FBI, and that's listed here. You can always go to our CAMS website. We don't publish the latest statistics on cybersecurity, but we have the latest research about how companies can keep themselves more secure. Verizon publishes a report every year, maybe you've heard of it, about the annual state of cybersecurity, and there's a link on this page for that. The United States White House has an agency called CISA, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. They often have the most up-to-date list of social engineering, and here's the publicly available page. And then there's a blogger, Brian Krebs, who publishes a regular blog post full of very interesting security issues. It's a bit more technical, but if that's the area of interest to you, I would recommend Brian Krebs's security site. Okay, if I leave you with one thing, I want to leave you with the idea that cybersecurity is everyone's job, and that's what we need to do as educators and professionals, is help everybody understand how they can keep their organizations more secure. And my commercial, of course, we're CAMS, Cybersecurity at MIT Sloan. We do fundamental research, and I've shared many of our projects with you. And if you'd like more information, my website is right here at the bottom. That's it. Questions, thoughts, comments?
Great, thanks very much, Keri. Yeah, we'll open it up for questions or comments. I guess I have one to start us off. So one thing I'm really interested in is, you know, today's world being incredibly dynamic and pressurized and accelerated and so on, or at least claims that it is. And I guess that presents maybe two challenges for cybersecurity. One is that there's now a generation, we'll say digital natives, who are used to bringing their own device. So the days of a large multinational or a large organization dictating the laptop we all use and the software we're allowed to use is gone. That's a huge no-no for a lot of graduates as they look for a place to work. So they're all bringing their own different things. And because we're in such a dynamic world, even if you knew today all of the different devices that were being used within your organization, within minutes, there will be new ones added and other ones taken away. So one, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on cybersecurity in this bring your own device generation. And the second thing is, when we think about acceleration and pressure, we'd all like to spend time and attention diligently checking every email, or when we go to a website, you know, whether we accept all cookies. We should take time to read the terms and conditions and to read all of these things in detail. But in reality, because we're under so much pressure, we tend to just click and go. We have our job to do and we need to get it done. We don't have time to do all the things we're doing anyway. So those kind of little checks tend to be overlooked. So I'm just wondering, are those two challenges very valid? And have you seen cybersecurity initiatives that handle those? Or are our current cybersecurity initiatives handling them anyway?
So good questions, Kieran, thank you. So your first question is about devices, the bring your own device thing. So the bring your own, in my opinion, the bring your own device thing is not the crux of the issue with cybersecurity. It isn't any more different for a corporation today, because they also have a multitude of devices even in their corporation for people who do want to use corporate technology. This is an issue that's been looked at for many years about the core and the edge. So there's a lot of research about managing the edge and managing the core. The key focus for many organizations right now is keeping the core secure and letting people use whatever access device they need to access the core, and putting the cybersecurity the cybersecurity activities, I guess, to protect the core. And that kind of gets back to this idea of the NIST model, identifying what's important for you to keep secure. So if the data is what's important to keep secure, then the cybersecurity investments would want to make sure that you meet that priority. Now, that said, there's a lot of use of the cloud, and people go to the cloud, particularly small and medium businesses, but even large companies. I've heard people tell me that they're going to the cloud because it's more secure. They don't have to worry about security. And the truth is, you do have to worry about security in the cloud. It's different, but you still have to worry about it. So for example, if you have Dropbox will keep Dropbox secure. But if you have data on Dropbox, it's your job to keep that data secure. You need to make sure you understand how that cloud is keeping, or in this case, a service, is keeping your data secure. And while the terms and conditions that you refer to, I do the same thing. I rarely read them anymore. The terms and conditions spell that kind of stuff out. And so a security professional would need to be reading those kinds of terms and conditions if they're making a corporate decision about whether to put something important in the cloud. But I think what you've highlighted is just another example of where we assume that the world is doing the right thing, and therefore we don't take the time to investigate it ourselves. And that's kind of the protect yourself, you know, be buyer beware kind of situation, in my opinion. So if you're going to put something in the cloud in a service, or if you're going to use AWS or any of the cloud services directly for your organization, you want to make sure that you ask the question and somehow answer the question of what's the security. Now, that's in a perfect world. Most people don't ask those questions, and I'm not even sure where I would go to look to see how Dropbox was protecting my data. But the rule of thumb is when you use a service, the service itself is protected. So their platform may go down and would come back up, but that doesn't mean they're backing up your data. So you might lose data if you are on a service that goes down. And so you need to make sure that you have backed up the appropriate information in a way that's secure for you. So, I think the millennial question is important. I think that the digital native generation is both more aware and less aware of cybersecurity risks. They're a bit more aware because they're digital natives. They see this stuff all the time. They eat and breathe digital world. But are they internalizing it as something that might happen to them? I don't think they're any different than you or me. I think what we see is most people, well, in the non-cyber world, the statistics show that most people buy an alarm for their home after they've had a break-in or after their neighbor has had a break-in. That's when they go start using the alarm if they have one, or buying an alarm system. Same thing happens with cyber. If you haven't experienced a breach, or you don't know anybody that's experienced a breach, then most likely your attitude is it's not going to happen to me. And therefore you're a little more lax in your thinking. And I think it's my mission and our research group's mission to just put it kind of back on the front of your brain and say, you know, you really need to think about it now. The time to think about a breach isn't when it's happening, it's before it's happened, so that you've thought about those 5 buckets. What is important? How are you going to protect yourself? How are you going to know if there's a problem? How are you going to recover? And how are you going to get back in operation, respond and recover? So I think, that's kind of the message for me, for the lay person in cybersecurity, is you don't have to be an expert, but you at least have to have thought through what do you want to protect? How are you going to protect it? And how are you going to recover if something happens to it? So that's a long answer to your question, but did I address what you're thinking? Did I answer your question?
Yep, perfect. Great. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great. I see Abandari has a hand up, I think.
Oh, well, I had a question.
Sure.
This is Kushal here. So the thing is, I've worked in a few companies as a red teamer, or had some of these security roles as well in the past few years. And one of the things that, in fact, I would hear from development teams is that it's hard enough to learn the skills that are needed to do their job, to learn all of the skills that are required to make sure that the security first mindset is baked in, is something that many people see as difficult. So how do you suggest that people go about dealing with this?
So one side of me says, suck it up. It's difficult. Life's difficult, but what's the alternative? But to be honest with you, you're right. I'm not asking that we have that we make every developer a cybersecurity expert. However, I am asking that they have a cybersecurity mindset. So when they're looking at 2 different libraries to make a decision about which library to build into their product, if you will, if one library is more secure than the other, that should be part of the consideration. It shouldn't be ignored. If one library has all the features you want, but it's very insecure, why would you use it? You know, why would you intentionally build something that was really insecure if you had a cybersecurity mindset? You would do it if you didn't have a cybersecurity mindset, because you'd say, well, it's much more difficult or much more expensive to build this secure product. I'd rather just get to market quickly with my insecure product. That's how we see it today. And then look what happens. We have all sorts of vulnerabilities. We have companies whose software is vulnerable and is attacked and brings people down and causes ransomware. So it's sort of the idea that, let me take it out of the cyber world for a minute and say, do you belong to a gym? Do you exercise regularly? Kushal, do you run?
Yes.
Do you exercise?
Yes, I do.
Why do you do it? It's hard on your body. It takes time, costs money.
Yeah, it's my health and it's personal, but it's hard to make it personal for everybody. For instance, you know, I understand that security hygiene is probably what you're hinting at, and that is something that people should have. And I agree with that completely. I have tried to get teams to do it for years, but it's not personal anymore, right? If it's a company.
Oh, see, I disagree. I think it is very personal, because you might get fired if you don't do it. I mean, if you were not able to make your team see cybersecurity was important, then you didn't have the right incentives in place for them. You know, and that's what the culture research is all about. So I 100% agree with you that it's difficult. I 100% agree with you that you're trying to change values, attitudes, and beliefs. And I 100% agree that that's really hard to do. But the alternative is worse, is where I'm going. If you can't convince the people around you, if your company values your crown jewels, you value your data, you value your products, you value your relationship with your customers, and nobody's going to say they don't, then you've got to make sure that you protect that somehow. And if it's not important enough to protect, then that's fine, but that's a management decision. If it's important enough to protect, then you've got to find a way to build cybersecurity into the mindset. And I think that's the lesson that we've seen. Companies will say exactly what you say, which is it's hard, it's expensive, it's not personal, and then they have a breach and they don't have a choice, because now their company is locked up, or now their company has lost data, or now their company has a reputation, like Facebook, for being insecure. And yeah, in some cases people don't care, but in some cases they do care. And so this is the free market system. So you have to decide if that is important enough for you. And that's why we're a management group, not a technology group. You know, we're looking at this from a management perspective, and we're saying you've got to make difficult choices. Yes, you've got to make difficult choices. But our culture research is all about, how do you change hearts and minds? How do you change the values, attitudes, and beliefs, so that your friends who are programmers, they don't say, wow, it's too difficult to do it, I'm not going to do it. It's difficult to go to the gym, but you do it. You know, it's difficult to take an hour out of your day to go take care of your personal health, but you do it. There are lots of people who don't do it because it takes too much time. It's too hard. It's not fun. And so they don't exercise. And then what happens? Well, there's consequences later on. And they absorb that consequence. They say, that's fine. I'm willing to not exercise, and I'm willing to be less healthy, or whatever the case may be. So that's the same thing with the cyber hygiene. You know, you can choose not to do it. You can choose not to update your iPhone when the update comes out, but eventually it doesn't work very well. And you made a choice, but you know, there's consequences. And what I'm saying is that if we want our organizations to be more secure, we have to have consequences if they don't. Because the other consequences could actually bring the company down. It could actually lose the company. I mean, as I said, there have been instances where industrial control environments got locked up because somebody clicked on a phishing email they shouldn't have clicked on. And the company cost the company millions of dollars. So I'm not trying to be on a soapbox. I'm just saying that you have one mindset, and I'm trying to promote and help you see a different one.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because it's a really important point. It is difficult, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. I see another question.
Yes, I'm Cindy. I'm a PhD at the University of Acton,
Awesome.
and this might have something or little to do with what you were just discussing a minute ago. So
Sure.
when you mentioned incentives, because he'd spoken about the difficulty of getting people to comply with security restrictions and regulations. And you mentioned incentives, and you said something about how if people are going to lose their jobs, then they're inclined to like comply with whatever is recommended. But I then thought about how you get, because technology right now has become more social, and it's constantly being embedded into everyday social scenarios. So for example, like with digital healthcare during COVID, we've seen how it's brought into the social domain. And so people that are using it aren't necessarily part of the organization. And in cases like that, there's vulnerability, of course, that you're opened up to more vulnerability because you're out there, but it's not as easy to, what kind of approach, what kind of incentives, how do you incentivize people following the rules in a situation like that where they don't work for you, they're just accessing a public service?
So you raised a couple interesting questions. So one is you started talking about health care and health data being out in more social. And you have to, well, in my opinion, you have to come at it from which perspective. So is it the person whose health information is out there? Is it the person who's using the health information? Or is it the company who is responsible for creating the health information? Whose security are we worried about? Because there's different incentives for each one. Again, it's easy to ratchet up the problem to something so generic that there's no one answer. There's no answer. It's like saying, how do we know how secure we are? Well, there's no one answer. It's too broad of a question to answer. As a PhD student, I'm sure you've seen this with your thesis work. You know, you ask a really interesting question, but you got to ask a really small, narrow question in order to actually do research in the area and come up with answers. So my thoughts about what you're saying is the same thing. So how do we keep the people that access our information from doing something insecure with it? And how do we motivate people to do the right thing is too broad of a question to answer when it comes to cybersecurity information. So let's narrow it down to a couple different questions. If I'm a hospital or a company, Peloton, and I've got personal health information of people, it's my responsibility to make sure I keep it secure. If the person accessing it wants it to be out there in the space, that's their choice, and that stops being my problem. It's not my problem to make sure that what you choose to put out there from your Peloton bike or your mirror or your watch is secure. That's your choice if you put it out there and it's your data. But I have to make sure that I've done everything I can as Peloton to make sure that I've kept the data secure, that the only person that accesses it is the person that should access it. And now we've got a problem. We've got a manageable, it's still not manageable, it's still big, but we've got a problem that I have control over. So that's one angle. The second angle is, okay, so you as Cindy, as a person who uses the Peloton, you put out there some social information and now other people go use it. Well, that's in part because, with all due respect, you might not be educated to what you're putting out there. That's a different problem. And if you're putting information out there, or if you're hacked, that's a third problem. But if you're putting information out there yourself and then people are using it against you in some way, that's a social problem that is a big problem. We don't have a solution for that yet. But that to me is an education problem, sort of back to the digital natives question. You know, we're told and we see people that are digital natives way oversharing. I mean, my daughter's 25 and she's on Instagram and many other tools all the time. And TikTok all the time. And I'm amazed, not just what she does. She doesn't do too much because her mom is a cyber person, but what I'm seeing out there is just shocking, what people just put out there in the guise of being funny or silly or creating content. And then that content is just really kind of, in my opinion, not something that I would want to share myself. But again, it's a free world. People share what they want to share, and that's a different problem. So my answer to you is I don't have an answer about how you motivate the people outside your organization to do the right thing all the time. I think you can set up incentives that encourage the right behaviors, and you can model the right behaviors, and you can tell people the right behaviors. And you can use many of the principles of building a culture of cybersecurity, both forward in your supply chain to your customers and backwards in your supply chain to your suppliers, but you really do not have control over them. And so you have to have that knowledge when you build your cybersecurity strategy so that you protect what you need to protect in a way that it's protected for your company or your organization. That's how I think about that problem.
Okay, thank you.
Is that helpful?
Yes,
A little bit?
quite helpful, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So Kieran, I think we're out of time. I do have a few more minutes if you guys want to stick around, but I want to be respectful of your group and your time. How do you want to go? Yeah, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, maybe just see if there's any final questions. I think you've addressed a lot of what, at least what I was wondering about coming into the talk anyway. Just wondering, is there anyone else that would like to ask anything? No, I think we're all done. I'm sure, again, if people have some follow-up questions or anything, I'm sure that they'll be in touch with me anyway, so I can pass those on. So on that note, Keri, I'd like to just extend thanks again for a great seminar. I can't think of a better way to end the semester's talks. And actually, particular thanks, I didn't mention at the start, but I do know that you got up at, I think, 6 a.m. Or you got up before 6 a.m. You started this talk at 6 a.m. So you were obviously getting ready before that. So I just want to acknowledge appreciation for that. I mean, we run these talks around this time of the day every week. So it was really nice for us to keep to our regular time slot. And we really appreciate you getting up early. So on that note, thanks a million, and yeah, we'll be in touch soon. And I know Keri is planning actually to visit Galway. It looks like it might be next year now, but still, that's good. It'll just leave us a little bit longer to look forward to it, but we look forward to that. And Keri will probably get a chance to meet a lot of you then as well. So yeah,
awesome.
We'll look forward to that. Thanks a million, Keri, and we'll end it at that for today.
Thank you. Nice to meet you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.